Okay, so Alfie's jumped over the thing. Alfie! Chris, can you get Alfie? I shut the gate and the baby gate and he jumped over it, so just getting him put back in. Tell me when he's in.
Come here, you. Out the way, look.
He has to know everything that's going on, so he jumped over the gate. Okay, now my dog has been put back over the gate. I just wanted to talk a little bit about my mental health, as well as anxiety. I also have BPD, so borderline personality disorder. In the last few years, there's been quite a worry that the word borderline creates too much stigma. So they've changed the name of the disorder to emotionally unstable personality disorder rather than borderline. The problem with borderline was people would think, well, borderline between what and what, you know? But the history of BPD is actually, when it was first described, it was actually seen as being on the schizophrenia spectrum, because of the mild psychosis and the mood elements to it. It was seen as on the schizophrenia spectrum, which is why it was called initially borderline personality disorder, because it was on the borderline of schizophrenia. But obviously now we know that it's not on the schizophrenia spectrum, it's on the mood spectrum. But that's the history of BPD and why it was called borderline in the first place. So it's not called borderline personality disorder anymore, it's called emotionally unstable personality disorder, because that fits with more of the symptoms and we have a greater understanding of it nowadays. It's hard to have this diagnosis, and it's hard because it's still one of those disorders that carries a lot of stigma, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot. There are some psychiatrists out there who won't even work with people who have emotionally unstable personality disorder because we're notoriously difficult to work with. Not that we do it on purpose, but it's been documented we are difficult because we often engage in what's called projecting, which is we project the negative parts of ourselves onto other people, and it makes relationships with therapists, psychiatrists, doctors very difficult. I really hope that the stigma around BPD can be reduced, because it is actually a very debilitating condition. The reason why BPD is so debilitating, or emotionally unstable personality disorder, the reason why it's so debilitating is because many people think that people who suffer from the condition are attention seekers. So they see their flagrant displays of emotion as not what they are, which is uncontrolled emotional responses, but they see it as you're deliberately doing that to seek attention. And one of the other things they say is that you know what you're doing, and you know you're doing it deliberately, and then using your mental health as an excuse. This is a devastating thing to say to someone with BPD, because the reality is that that's not what's happening. And what's happening is we have emotional responses to things that, you know, may seem too big for the thing that we're responding to. You know, you may think that our emotional responses are unnecessary or unwarranted, which they usually are, but we can't control them. And, it's very hard because we're often seen as very insightful and very bright, and we're very often seen as, well, if you're so bright and if you're so insightful, why do you do these things? And because you're bright and because you're insightful, therefore you must be doing these things on purpose. That is a very ignorant and unlearned response. It's very hard to be this way, because it causes rifts in your family relationships, in your friendships, in your day-to-day life. Emotionally unstable personality disorder is very debilitating. It affects every aspect of your life, and people judge you. People really do judge you. They judge you. They say, well, you're smart, you must know what you're doing. But I want to say that intelligence and the ability to regulate one's emotions are separate. I can intellectually understand how and why I should regulate my emotions, but emotionally, I don't have the skills or the ability to do that. And that's part of my disorder. So when people judge me and they say, oh, well, you obviously must know what's going on, most of the time I do know what's going on, but I find it very difficult to control my responses. And that leads to low confidence, because it's very difficult to have confidence in yourself when intellectually you know that the way you're responding is not right, but you physically, emotionally cannot change that response. So it leads to a lot of self-loathing, which is also one of the primary diagnostic factors for emotionally unstable personality disorder. I've managed to do like 4 days of walking 4 miles a day. My feet are killing me. I've been told that I have high blood pressure, which I have. It's hard to explain, but I have very severe anxiety, to the point when, this was years ago when I was, I'm 27 now, it must have been when I was 21, living in supported living, and basically I would get so anxious. My main fears are having a stroke or having a blood clot. When I was 21, living in supported living, I used to frequent the A&E department all the time, and the reason I used to go up there was because I was convinced that I was having a stroke and that I was dying, and my anxiety actually used to come out in my body, and one side of my body would go completely numb. That's how powerful my anxiety was. And then I got put on my anti-anxiety meds, sertraline, and that really helped. But since I've been diagnosed with high blood pressure, my anxiety has gone through the roof, because when I didn't have something wrong with me, I thought there was something wrong, and now there is something going on. I'm petrified. So far I've had at the doctor's my, how can I say, not my work done, but, my stats done, and I'm 24 stone and 13 pounds, so nearly 25 stone, and my blood pressure is 168/95, which for someone who's 27 is extremely high. So this is where we're starting off, and hopefully I can do something that inspires. I've had people die in my life. my husband passed away from sudden adult death. I was there when he died. I basically watched it. It was like he was suffocating. He told me he couldn't breathe. And he was calling for me, and it was basically like watching someone suffocate. It was awful. And then a friend that I had, he was my best friend's partner. She's not my friend anymore, but he died at the age of like 26 from a blood clot. So when doctors say, oh, you're young, so nothing terrible could happen, in my life, my husband died at 23, and someone I knew died at 26. So it does happen, and that's increased my anxiety a lot. But I hope that I can succeed and inspire, and I want to share everything with, with people in this documentary, because people do struggle with their weight, and it's a very common thing, and they struggle with motivation and mental health, and I want to incorporate all those things and give a tell-all documentary. So I hope and pray that we can do this together. Mwah. I have a living anxiety detector, and his name is Fletcher. Whenever I get anxiety, he always knows, and he always looks at me funny. Don't you, Fletch? Yes, Mum. Do you know when I get anxious? Are you Dr. Fletcher? You're so cute. Alfie. Okay, so this is Alfie. And, he really doesn't care either way. Whether I'm anxious or, I'm pretty sure I could be dead and he wouldn't notice. But yeah, Alfie, you gonna come and say hello? So I'm too busy running around. Hopefully he'll stop running around when Chris gets here.
Hi, I'm here.
Hi!
Hi, how are you?
Chris is here. Hello!
Hello.
It's for my documentary.
Hello, everybody.
So it's don't even know what the date is. It's February 11th, I think. I'm supposed to go on a walk today, but I am not feeling motivated at all. The DWP have screwed up my money, so instead of being paid £350, I got paid £61. And because they messed up, I now have to go through a mandatory reconsideration, which could take 6 weeks. So they've really left me financially in the worst shape. Really pissed off about it. Boom. Yo, I am drunk as fuck. I'm so drunk. Hang on. Oh my god. Oh, I feel dizzy. I'm drunk as fuck. I don't know, I'm drunk. Hiya. It's currently February 15th. I'm sorry I've been a bit quiet over the last couple of days. To be honest, I've been quite low. Just low mood. I've felt very negative and bad about myself. It's complicated to explain, but for a long time, I said about a year, I've been worrying about whether or not I'm a psychopath, and the thought terrifies me. I have an instinct in me, a very big instinct, and the instinct is to protect people, but it's not just to protect people in general, it's to protect people from me. It's very complicated. I don't know how to explain it properly, but I have several risk elements for psychopathy. I'm manipulative. I've harmed animals in my past. It's actually difficult for me to say this, but I harmed a rabbit when I was younger. It was a rabbit or a hare, I'm not actually sure. It was in what we called in our area Pogo's Wood. It was at the bottom of my parents' land. We had like a piece of wood that went across a river so we could get there. I can't remember how old I was, maybe 15 probably. There was a rabbit and it was caught in barbed wire, and when I say it was caught like it had been there for a while and it had probably struggled, because it looked like to me that it had struggled and got itself in a real bad situation. I picked up I want to say a rock, but it wasn't exactly a rock because it wasn't something that was naturally occurring. It was a man-made piece of rock that had been smashed. I don't quite know what it was, but I picked it up, and I remember thinking to myself at the time, because it was making this awful screaming noise. I don't know if you've ever heard a rabbit scream, but it's awful. It's high pitched. It's really awful. It's funny because I still have nightmares about killing this rabbit, and in my nightmares or whenever I remember it, I always hear the screeching or the screaming of the rabbit like a human scream. Obviously it didn't scream like a human at the time, but I always remember it like that. But anyway, I hit it with this, I'm going to call it a rock because I don't know what else to call it. It wasn't granite, it wasn't anything like that, but it was something man-made. It wasn't a brick, but it was something man-made. Because I deliberately went and I looked for something that was heavy, because I thought to myself, when I hit this rabbit, I want to hit it once. I don't want to be beating it to death. I want it to hit it once and for it to be put out of its misery. So I looked around and I found this. I don't know what it was. It wasn't a brick, it wasn't granite, but it was something man-made and it was heavy. And I picked it up and I hit the rabbit on the head. I wasn't like, the blood didn't squirt on me or anything, but when I hit it, the screaming stopped, the screeching stopped, which is what I was aiming for, because I was aiming to hit it literally once, so that it would pass away and not be in pain. But hitting it once in my mind meant that I had to hit it hard to make sure that it wouldn't live and suffer. And due to hitting it hard, which I did, its skull cracked and it was just not pretty, and I don't really want to talk about it. And I've lived with the guilt ever since, because animals deserve to live, but I really thought that it was dying. I mean, this barbed wire was embedded in this animal, and even if I'd have picked apart the barbed wire, I don't think that it would have lived a good life. However, killing animals in your childhood is a sign of psychopathy, and I have been, and I can be manipulative, and these things hint at psychopathy. My mental health team they're absolutely, completely adamant that I'm not a psychopath, and they're adamant about that because apparently if I cared about being a psychopath, it means I'm not one, because psychopaths don't care, apparently, about what people think. But in my mind, of course they care about what people think. Like, how can we protect our image without being able to control how people see us? Okay, I didn't bludgeon the rabbit to death. I didn't harm it because, you know, I wanted it dead. I harmed it because it was suffering in my mind, and I don't think I could have saved it from that suffering. That's the reason. I can't talk about this anymore, but it was bad. It was bad. There was blood, and can't talk about it anymore. Okay, it's 18th of Feb, and I'm off to the GP surgery to get the results of my tests that they were worried about, so wish me luck. So do you want to take bets on whether it's death or not?
It won't be death, dear, because you're walking towards it. You know, so
How do you know I could die when I get in that?
you could, but it would be unfortunate.
Be my luck.
No, it wouldn't be. Is that interesting?
I like the floor. It's shiny.
Shiny wood floor. I think
It's real wood, that's why, not stuff that Alfie can eat.
not lino.
So we've just come out of doctor's surgery, haven't we?
Yes.
And it's not terrible news. My high blood pressure has gone down a bit, which is good. And the doctor seems to think that I don't have a genuine blood pressure problem. He said it's linked to my alcohol use. He said there was concern because my liver enzyme levels are continuing to rise rather than go down. So he's sending me off to, I think, to Derriford to have another scan on my liver, an ultrasound scan. So it's not all terrible news. My blood sugar levels were fine. all the other tests they did were fine, and he seems pretty convinced that my blood pressure problem is not what he said it's not a genuine blood pressure problem. You know, so he wants me to reduce my weight, obviously, and reduce my alcohol, and yeah, so that was the outcome of that. So not all bad, pretty good really. Anything to say, Chris? Yay! Today is February 19th, 2019. I'm starting to feel a bit more settled in myself. I think I've been quite anxious about, obviously, my physical health, and stuff like that. So I'm starting to feel a little bit more settled again, in myself. The problem is I know that won't last, because I know me and I know my mental health, but I just kind of have to, sorry, my dog's whining. What are you whining at? I swear, he looks out the window, sees a bird and wishes he could fly or something, because like he's funny. But yeah, I think I feel a bit more settled in myself. I was quite low the other day, and I ended up cutting a bit, did both arms. But that urge has subsided now, so I am feeling a bit more positive. There is one aspect of my mental health that I haven't really spoken about so far, and that's because it's very complicated and difficult to explain, but I'll talk a little bit about it. A few years ago, when I had a psychiatrist named Ellen, she diagnosed me with erotomanic delusions. However, it's not a constant diagnosis. It's currently not on my records, because it currently doesn't apply. But even though it doesn't apply, I've had it for a long time, since I was young. But I get really intense obsessions with people, and I get really intense crushes on them. And my mental health team aren't sure. They sort of think it's kind of like part erotomanic-y, part my BPD and how it comes out for me. They're not 100% sure. I'm a complex individual. I have many complex thoughts, and sometimes it's hard to categorize those. But it does cause quite a lot of disruption to my life and the life of others. I'm currently on a police tag, because I sent one too many loving emails to my college tutor. And yeah, I had to go to court, and thankfully they were kind to me, because I think they kind of realised that I have stuff going on around that area and that issue. It's been quite hard to adjust to the tag. I have a curfew, I have to be in at certain times. And yeah, it's I think I've found it more psychologically difficult to deal with the tag than I thought I would. I respect the court's decision, and I know that it wasn't just fair, the sentence they gave me, it was lenient. So I'm very grateful to them for sort of giving me sort of another chance. But yeah, I'm a complex person. I have very complex thoughts. I have very complex pathology, should I say. I think about things in depth all the time. And sorry, my dogs are fighting. Hey! Can you just stop for 1 minute? I have very complex thoughts. I worry about my impact on other people all the time. I'm constantly thinking. I tend to get obsessed with thoughts as well, and ideas. It's just a very complex life I lead, but hopefully, the future holds positives. The future holds positive things for me. Sorry, that stuttering is because of my antipsychotics. Because I take sertraline, which is an anti-anxiety and antidepressant drug, and I also take quetiapine. In America, I think they call it Seroquel or something like that. But it's an antipsychotic mood stabilizer, and it does wonders for me. Because I'm very difficult to handle off of it. But yeah, it causes me to stutter sometimes, so it has that side effect for me. Doesn't have that for everybody, but that's just something that happens to me. But yeah, I'm trying to stay positive and looking forward to starting my walking up again. And yeah, I'll let you know in the next episode. Mwah!